what do you say to these people who may be even not just hazy about what a personal brand is, but why they actually need one?
What I like to do is kind of reframe it and call it professional agency. I really think that personal branding is developing professional agency, meaning what is that suitcase? What is that suitcase full of your credibility, your visibility, your value, your authority that you carry with you from job to job? Is one of those things that is expected in the employment workplace now. Then also in terms of your career insurance, it is the most important thing that you can develop and do.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long, or sense what's coming and justify staying anyway. There's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
Hello, and welcome back to Career Blast in a Half. Happy Wednesday, and happy, oh my goodness, amazing guest today. I love a good creative. I don't know about you, but anybody who has built their career around the business of creativity, my hat goes off to this person. And our guest today, Phil VanDusen, he has been in the creative world probably longer than maybe even some of our listeners. And that's important in a good way, because this means he's seen industries go through evolutions and changes, and he's actually been able to keep pace with them, in many cases outpace them. So today he is also behind the creative professional mastermind group called Bonfire. But I'm going to let Phil do a little bit more, because today we're going to talk about old dogs and better tricks. So for anybody that doesn't know this, I have no issue telling you I'm 60. And I don't know how old Phil is, and he doesn't have to disclose that either. But I just don't want you to ever think that you need to sign up to be out for pasture, because that is just not the case. Phil, thank you for being here. Thank you for being so willing and transparent, and also such an advocate for so many that struggle with things like ageism or feeling like somehow, some way they've become irrelevant. So give us a little background. Tell everybody who you are and like where this all started for you.
Sure. I'm actually trained as a fine artist. So I started my career with a master's in painting, and I used to teach painting in university. And in my early 30s, I realized that academia in fine arts was not going to be paying my bills for the rest of my life. So I actually started my own t-shirt company, and through that kind of fell into the fashion industry. And eventually, after a series of smaller companies, I ended up at Old Navy right when it was starting off. And Old Navy, you may not know, but it was the fastest growing company in history. It hit $1 billion in sales in under 5 years. And so being part of that rocket ship at the very beginning was really wonderful and intense. And it was within the Gap Inc. series of companies. So it had a lot of support to be able to do that. But I served as a VP of graphic design at Old Navy for about 11 years. I then made the jump over to the agency side and have worked in a couple different agencies as an executive creative director, working with a host of the Fortune 100, and then made the jump back over to the client side and was a VP of design at PepsiCo, VP of global snacks, which is a title that I always really loved. And so I've worked both sides of the street, agency side, client side, and done branding for product and brand strategy and brand identity, and brand for, as I said, a ton of different companies and industries. And so I've seen it, been there, done that. And then I had a major burnout late in my career and left my last corporate role and started my own consultancy. I just decided to go out on my own. And when I did that, I realized a whole lot of things. Number one, I'd built brands for a lot of other people, but not for myself.
Mhm.
And I had to learn a whole lot of stuff very quickly in order to build my consultancy. And I have that experience too, in terms of hitting the ground running very late in your career and having to figure it out. And so I've been able to do that and built a bit of a content empire and mastermind group and clients in branding and strategy. So that kind of brings me to up to date.
What would you say? Because this is a lot of evolution, right? You went client side, you've been agency side, you've been all over branding, you left branding, you left the corporate world of branding. And throughout all of these iterations of Phil, right? Your brand is probably not the same either because
No, I would say really I had no brand up until the time I left corporate, because I'd been, when you work for other companies, your business card has the name of the company on it. It doesn't
Mm.
reflect really you at all. Without your business card, you're titleless, so to speak. And so for the majority of my career, I had a very executive title at big recognizable companies and agencies, and that carried a lot of weight when I went to conferences and had conversations, et cetera. But then suddenly when I woke up in my mid 50s and I didn't have that, and suddenly I had no business card, I had no company that anyone recognized, I realized very quickly that I'd spent a lot of time building other people's brands and no time building my own. When I went out on my own, I had a 2-page Wix website. It had a black and white picture of me on page one, little bio, and then a resume and a kind of lame slide portfolio of some portfolio pieces. And that was it. I had never published an article. I'd never spoken at a conference. I could stand up in a room full of C-suite executives and pitch a major brand strategy project. But when it came down to knowing how to build an email list, I was a complete babe in the woods and had a whole lot to learn very quickly in order to build my own agency.
This syndrome, conundrum, a series of events is probably something on a very regular basis, I would imagine.
It is. And I coach people through those sorts of career pivots and transitions as part of my consultancy now. And so having lived it, it makes it a lot easier to coach and give people the tools and the knowledge and the expertise to be able to navigate those changes on their own. And
So I even had a person that I was talking to earlier this week, and I asked her about her personal brand, and she shared with me what you just described. What are you talking about? She actually said that. Well, what are you talking about? I work for such and such. I said, but what happens if they go away? Then what? And for so many people that we both interface with on a very regular basis, you can get laid off, you could move to a completely different industry, but the one commonality that is going to go with you no matter where you are is you. And you're attached to your brand. So what do you say to these people who may be even not just hazy about what a personal brand is, but why they actually need one? Not It's not a nice to have, it's not an on the side kind of thing. What do you suggest to them as a way of either reframing it, because we didn't necessarily have this back then, right? So why would I do it now?
Lauren, you make a really great point. And that is one of those things that a lot of people in mid or late career realize, is that anything can happen. And you may have a very nice VP role at a nice, great company, and you've had great stock options and bonuses for years and years. And then suddenly McKinsey comes in and they reorganize the whole company, or it gets acquired by another company and they decide to consolidate major departments, or your manager changes and suddenly your manager wants to bring in their people from their old job. I can't tell you how many iterations of this there are, but there's so many ways to get caught flat-footed in your professional career by no fault of your own. That's the thing. A lot of people think, oh, I'm in good standing, I'll never be laid off for cause. And the thing is that, yeah, you won't. Chances are 85% when you're on the street, you're not going to be there for cause. You're going to be there for some something that happened outside of your control. And so instead of, when you were talking about your colleague or your coaching client talking about what is my personal brand, I think that the word and the phrase personal branding has been around for so long now that for a period of time is like this big question mark. And then people figured out what it was. And now so many people are talking about it that it's become a hackneyed term, and it's lost a little bit of its gravitas, I think, that it had at the beginning. And what I like to do is reframe it and call it professional agency. I really think that
Mm.
personal branding is developing professional agency, meaning what is that suitcase? What is that suitcase full of your credibility, your visibility, your value, your authority that you carry with you from job to job? And if you think that it's in your business card, it's not. And if you think that it's in your LinkedIn profile, it's not. You've got to develop a much broader ecosystem to establish that suitcase than you probably think you do. And the expectation in the professional sphere now is much higher than it used to be. It used to be that the old business card would be great and your one-page Word resume would be fantastic.
The stakes are different too. So having a personal brand today, and what you were really getting at is it's a much, much bigger, and hopefully that's not a scary sign up, right? It's a much bigger process than a business card or any of those other materials. It's an entire process, feeling, experience. I like to call your personal brand your promise.
It is your promise. It's also your presence. It's your
Your
presence
promise
and your
and your
visibility and your credibility. And I think the need to build one isn't so much your internal feeling of self importance or anything like that, but the expectation of, especially more senior people, is that you have a level of visibility and credibility and authority within your category or space, which didn't used to be the case. People with personal brands at the beginning, companies didn't want someone who had some sort of fame or notoriety outside of under their umbrella, their sphere. They wanted your fame and notoriety to be associated deeply with your company. And now companies are actively seeking out people who have a level of visibility and authority in their category or space to be an executive in their company, because they're bringing with them that transferable authority, which reflects and acts as a halo on the company that they are now joining. And companies are encouraging people to become visible and credible inside of their category or space while they're employees of that company, because it has that positive brand halo on the company that you're working for. Now, there is the danger, and HR is always freaking out about this. There is the danger that you misspeak or you make some post that was inadvisable or something like that. Your marketing department can make a post on Twitter that their X that's unadvised as well. With the visibility that's come with the internet, there are more landmines, but for the most part, you're developing this level of personal agency and a brand ecosystem that you own and that is transportable, is one of those things that is expected in the employment workplace now. But then also in terms of your career insurance, it is the most important thing that you can develop and do.
I love that you use this term career insurance. And I want to really focus some of this conversation on career insurance because a lot of us have fallen out of that. I guess you could call it that benefit package, metaphorically, right? And in the creative industry, and now I will include the advertising world, even tech for some is known to be a very age obsessed vertical of the whole career sphere. And we've seen so many posts and things that talk specifically about what does old mean? When do people become overqualified? Lots and lots of euphemisms and hints around the fact that you are some kind of old dog and there aren't any more tricks left in your doggy bag. And that's not true, right? We know that's not true. That's a perception. But what I want to ask you about is what is happening in these creative industries, and how are some people able to hang on and thrive, and how are others, whether they be younger or older, forced to move out?
To be honest with you, I don't think it's the person. I actually think that there is a level of equality that happens in how companies that are ageist, or categories of business that are ageist, in how they treat their employees who come to a certain age. If you are in the creative industries, if you're in advertising, or if you're in branding or brand strategy and you work for a larger agency, if you have ascended to a level of an executive role, you get a pass for a certain period of time. And there are agencies that do have a level of respect for the gray hair in the room, because the clients, who are many times gray haired C-suite folks, to feel that there's someone who has a little bit of history and knowledge who's working on their account. When it comes to creative directors or people who are the doers more, there is definitely a level of youngerism, which is preferred, because they see those folks as being more in touch with current trends, and et cetera. And so what I'm trying to say is that if, your seniority will indemnify you to being in danger of falling prey to ageism. But the industry that you're in, like you said, Lauren, is very kind of key in that tech is insanely ageist. I heard a statistic recently that the average employee at LinkedIn and Facebook is 28 years old. And that's an average, meaning half of them are younger than that. And so advertising industry, incredibly ageist. I remember when I first headed off on my own, I found a post on LinkedIn called "Where Have All the 40-Year-Old Creative Directors Gone?" And there were 2,500 comments on it. And I had nothing better to do because I was starting my own agency. So I actually read all of them. And it was amazing to me that when you hit 40, you have a big old target on your back in the advertising agency world, unless you are a principal in the company. And so I think that to a certain extent, it depends on the industry that you're in. The creative departments or areas within in-house companies tend to also be ageist, but it's a little HR is paying a little closer attention to the legal jeopardy that they can get in if practices are not adhered to. But to a certain extent, I don't think that there's only so much you can do as an individual. But the important thing is that you absolutely have to do those things, because if you don't, and you find yourself pounding the pavement at your early or mid 50s, you are going to come to the shocking realization that you're not getting the interviews that you used to get. And I coach people like this every single day.
And so I know this is a big aside. So aside from starting your own business, what are your options? I'm only asking to put that aside because I'm not to diminish or to say it doesn't exist, because it is a big thing, but it might not be for everyone either. Some people really do not want to take on a lot of the responsibilities or all of the other pieces that come with entrepreneurism. So what happens to that audience? Where do they go? Where are the viable opportunities for them?
Yeah, I think that actually the process of building that career insurance is the same, whether you're deciding to continue your career trajectory within working for the man, or whether you end up working for yourself. I would venture to say that probably 80% of people will eventually be consulting or working for themselves by the time that they're 60 or 65. And because people are living and working longer now, you have to think about that fact. If you are looking like you're starting to age out at 58 or 60 and you're planning on working to 67 or 70, what are you going to do with those 10 years? Who are you going to be working for? And how are people going to know that you exist? Or how are they going to find their way to you? And you have to plan ahead for that. And building a personal brand or building personal agency, professional agency, the process that you go through in order to do that is the same. The question is, where are you going to take it once it's built, or what level of intensity do you have to engage with it in order to, are you then looking and driving clients to you, or are you driving recruiters to you? It's the same thing.
Exactly. So I think that what you're saying is there's no getting around it.
Yeah,
You know,
there's no getting around it.
you're going to need it in this camp, or you're going to need it over here, or this is now cost of entry or table stakes.
Yeah, it's a new world. It's a new employment environment now.
I want to go back for a minute because you didn't necessarily talk specifically about this, but back in the day, things like ageism were even easier to prove than they are now. Because what you've talked about and what we all know is back in 1967, there was this here legislation that said, hey, by the way, it is uncool. You cannot let people go or fire them because they're at a certain number,
Protected class. Yeah.
a protected class. And what you just said is at a certain time and place, you're probably going to get squeezed out. So, what, like, who's speaking out? What's happening here? It's not like it's a shocker. And at the same time, there's this so called legislation in place. So, how do these two things?
Yeah,
Uh,
the legislation could have been written on toilet paper for all of the good that it does, to be honest with you, because it has very little teeth. And there are companies, particularly in the tech industry, which are paying much closer attention to the public perception of their company. And so when large layoffs are done, in many cases, they will publish lists, at least internally to their employees, of the titles and the departments of people and the ages of people that were laid off. They won't attach names to them or specifics to them, but they are taking a little bit of responsibility to make it more public in terms of the actions they're taking, and that they're being very cognizant and supposedly upstanding about how they're dealing with mass layoffs. Now, are they legally required to do that? Absolutely not. Are there about 10 million other loopholes that companies can leverage in order to lay off older people? Absolutely. And do they? Absolutely. There are departmental reorganizations, or there are, your position was eliminated, your title was eliminated, and then you go back 6 months later and they're advertising for your title again. And so you can't really rely on the legal protections at all, in my opinion.
so,
It's very difficult to prove, number one, if you are laid off,
exactly.
and you believe strongly it was because of ageism. It's very difficult to prove.
I actually spoke earlier this week with a former creative that I placed in a UX role many years ago. And he reached out to me on LinkedIn in the DMs and said, I've been through 6 layoffs at this company. He was actually at the same company that I placed him at many years ago. And here I am at 51. And he was on the inside the company. He was in an in-house position. But his concern was, I'm 51. I don't have a degree. I am a senior user experience designer. Now what? And I know you talk to these people every single day. So, what is your Phil VanDusen top 3 things? Because here we are at the end of the year, and while of course I would never, I don't want to ever say, yeah, it's going to happen to you, but I also don't want to say it will never happen to you either. So, those who are listening today, what would you share with them and advise them to do first and foremost? Let's just say it's happening. They find out, and sometimes they find out right in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they're
Yeah.
coming into the year. So, what does that look like?
Yeah,
Do you feel?
there's two kind of key important things, and I'm going to share a tool with your listeners that they can
Please.
download. That's going to be a little bit of a roadmap and a tool that you can actually use to start thinking through some of the pieces of developing a personal brand or professional agency. The two kind of key aspects of it are you have to become visible, and it's very easy to be invisible and hide behind a LinkedIn profile. You have to start showing up visibly in social media. And that can be as easy as commenting on other people's posts. I like to say that comments are content too. If you engage in comments in a meaningful way, not just like, hey, great post, you make a thoughtful comment, or you make a thoughtful comment and then have a probing question around the content that you read, and you instigate a back and forth in an actual conversation with the person who posted it. That creates a level of engagement which elevates you in visibility. Posting original content, kind of the next step up is posting curated content. So say you found an article or a podcast or a YouTube video or something that you think is important and worthy of other people's attention, to post that on LinkedIn or on another social platform, X or Threads or whatever platform you deem is important to your industry, and make some thoughtful comments around why you think this is an important thing that people should watch. It starts to surface you in visibility and starts to establish the fact that you are a professional in this industry. You have thoughts around it. You can discern and find important content on the internet that you think moves your industry or category, and that you're going to bring that to the public sphere and make a very smart comment or synopsis of it for people.
Wait, I'm sure that I'm not the first person that's ever going to ask this question, but what do you do with people that want to resist even commenting or writing original content? I wish that there was a better way, because there are so many people that at least we work with who will say, I just don't do social media. I don't feel comfortable doing this. And there's got to be some kind of either acceptance that I don't know what else to offer you, or move forward at your own risk, because it's hard to find what's not visible, and or if you have a better suggestion.
Yeah, the only other suggestion to that in terms of visibility is your network. And
Mm-hmm.
that falls into the category of should I wish I knew very early in my career, which is that everyone that you work with right now, 2 to 3 years from now, is going to be working somewhere else. And staying in touch and building meaningful friendships and staying in contact with people who you've worked with in previous jobs, as they move to other companies, those are the people who are going to be able to get your resume or your portfolio onto the desk of the hiring manager. We all know, Lauren, that the online job application system is completely broken, and it's like throwing your resume into a black hole. And so you either work through a recruiter or you're working through a network connection who can get your resume into the channel that it needs to get to. And so if you're not going to become visible on social media, you darn well become visible to your network and start speaking up and sending some DMs and some emails, just saying hi, just checking in. And a lot of people even bristle at this, right? They say, oh, I haven't talked to this person in 5 years. They're going to think it's weird that I'm reaching out to them. Or
They think I'm a
it's
stalker.
been,
They think it's
yeah,
creepy.
they've been 10 years. They're going to think I want something. Just think about it this way. What if you got a DM on LinkedIn from someone that you liked working with 10 years ago, who you lost touch with, and they say, hey, Phil, it was really cool working with you back at Old Navy. I remember shopping in Europe with you. It was so much fun. I've been working at this company. I was just wondering, like, where are you these days? What's going on? I'd love to hear from you. That's it. It's like people do business with people. They don't do business with brands. People can smell a sale a mile away, a pitch a mile away. We have super antenna for anything salesy these days. We've been schooled in it. So just make it human. Just be a human being. Just reach out and care, and reach out to make yourself a goal. Reach out to 5 people a day and do that for a month. And before you know it, your DMs are going to be full of people that were network connections that could now mean something to you. And here's the thing. Okay, here's your training wheels. When you do that, after you send out your 3-sentence, hi, how you doing? If you don't hear anything, like 3 or 4 days later, find a really cool article or something like that from Forbes or Entrepreneur or whatever it is, and say, and then send them the link to that and say, hey, I found this really cool article in Fast Company that I think you'd really dig. It has to do with the industry that you're in right now. And you send it to them, and that's it. I thought you really like this. End of story. Doesn't have to have a big paragraph, doesn't have anything. It's just showing that you care and you're giving something of value to them that they can use or they cannot. But it's a way of creating and starting to rekindle that connection, which is going to be your visibility, which is what I was saying that you really need to start paying attention to. You can't sit in your office or behind your desk and expect the world to beat a path to your door, because it's not going to anymore.
Mm.
I don't care how senior you
I
are.
do think that networking needs a rebrand, and I think that you and I should
Oh, that's a great idea. Let's do it.
rebrand it called Caring.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. And get the whole idea into a reframe around what is really going on here.
Yeah, I've heard it called P2P, which is instead of B2B, it's P2P, meaning person.
Person to person. Absolutely. Yeah. I call networking the broccoli of business, because everybody knows that it's good for them, but nobody wants to do it.
Right.
Phil, I know that you are as much of an ageist loudmouth like me, and for all the right reasons. I don't mean it like you're just a troublemaker. Sometimes I am too.
I am.
For good reason. For good reason. Talk to us about what is being sacrificed and compromised by this audience not being in the same level of mix with respect to building brands, serving businesses, being in the creative world, right? What do clients, what role are they being, what like downside are they experiencing because this audience is no longer as integrated into the business process? And what does this mean, and how might we be able to work around that?
And so just to clarify what you're asking, what are businesses losing out on by?
Thank you.
Okay. In the branding industry, one of the things that companies are losing out on is their historical knowledge, right? So the understanding of the brand over time. It's older people tend to be the kind of the libraries of brand equity. Like, where has it been historically? What have the movements been in the brand? What have been successes? What has not worked so well? And as an older person working in any kind of company, you don't want to be the gray hairs going, yeah, we tried that, it didn't work. You don't want to be that guy, but you do want to be able to bring to the table a little bit of historical reference that can help put things in context. And so that's when companies shed their older workers, that's one of the things that they're letting go of. Another is that older workers have a tendency to have a higher level of emotional intelligence. Hate to say it. They tend to be a little more politically and savvy in terms of communication. And they can mentor junior people. That's another thing, is that when you shed that upper age tier of people in your company, you're getting rid of the kind of accumulated knowledge of how to do the damn job that is residing in them. One of the other things, the thing that kills me about the advertising industry, is that we all know that the boomers are moving into retirement now, and the boomers have a ton of money, right? So everyone wants to sell to the older people now. So who are the people that you're going to hire to get that message across to the boomer generations? I tell you, it's not 25, 28 somethings, right? Because when you see the advertising that's coming across the main channels right now, it is so hackneyed and so old. And it does not speak to that buying demographic. And so if you want to speak to that buying demographic, you better talk and get the person who's in that demographic to start creating some of those products and services, because they're the ones that you have to be courting and putting out front for that demographic to trust you, really, when it comes down to it.
This question, you're just begging Are there now, I would not be surprised. So whoever's listening out there, take this idea and run with it. Are there agencies that are specializing in boomer products, whether they be advertising agency, packaging agencies, other branded companies, even in-house teams that are really looking into that? Is that like happening?
Yes, there are. There are agencies, and just like there are agencies that specialize in selling products to women or products to young girls, or there's an agency for every single age and demographic. And there's certainly, I guarantee you, and know of a couple agencies that are specializing in the older demographic and servicing, providing their services to companies who have products that are selling to that demographic. Just like the marijuana industry, the cannabis industry has created it's if you took the alcohol industry and you like created a whole new one, that is the cannabis industry now. And it's an entirely new category of business, which is gigantic in terms of revenue potential. And there are agencies cropping up all over the place who are servicing that particular category of business.
Move, right?
Yeah, very smart move.
Very smart move for all the reasons that you said. Demographically, we know that this is the fastest growing segment, and also the disposable income levels are also off of the charts. People are living longer, so it's not just that they're growing in the size, it's also that there's going to be a lot more life left to be lived. Phil, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for dealing with some technical challenges. I want to thank you for correcting me. I want to thank you for being you. I want to thank you because you are serving so many people and this audience of creative for all the reasons that you just shared, but also because I really believe that having that history also makes better creative. They've seen it all. They've been there. They have an understanding of what really has its, I guess you could say, timeless impact. And I think that there's a lot of, not to say that there's anything bad about new advertising or new branding or new packaging, but I think that there is a lot to be said for being able to leverage a legacy. And
so there's one tool that I want to share with your listeners before I go, and that is this tool that I developed called the Personal Brand Wheel. Yes. And it's loosely based on the Life Wheel, which is a tool that a lot of executive coaches and life coaches use. But it's built specifically to help you visualize all of the moving parts of building a personal brand and help you think through them and help you pay attention to what it is that you may have or what you may need to build and consider as you think about building your professional agency. And so if you go to my website, philipvandusen.com/PBW for Personal Brand Wheel, you can download that. It's a PDF. It's got instructions, and I think you'll really enjoy it.
We'll also include a link in the show notes, guys. So don't worry that if you're driving and you're listening to this, because we've got you covered. All right, Phil, I will see you around the LinkedIn streets. I know that for sure. Thank you also for having me on your show. That being said, for everybody who's listening, I'm going to ask you this like small but very helpful favor. Please write a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. We would so appreciate that. That would mean the world to us. If you're generating some new ideas and actually rethinking how you are approaching your career, we want to know. We want to know what's working. So thank you in advance. Thank you for listening today, and we will see you next week with another amazing guest. And until then, have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Lauren.
Of course.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next Career Blast in a Half. Most of all, thank you for you.